Welcome everyone to the Thursday morning series. Jon Taylor's joining today. And what topic do you have for us today?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the healthy role of shame in
Mm,
relationships. So this is a fun, fun for me. Maybe turn what you think about shame on its head a little bit, because I actually think it's a very useful, maybe avoided component of relationships. So this actually started with a comment my 15-year-old made to me. We went camping last weekend at a family reunion, my siblings and some cousins and a lot of his cousins, and um, as as is maybe part of my neuroticism as a therapist, whenever we leave a big family gathering, I ask my kids if they want to debrief. What did you like about that? What would you want to repeat? You definitely not want to have to encounter in the future. So, my 15-year-old named some things that he really likes, and then uh, what he didn't want to repeat is we left the campground on Sunday morning, as was the plan. He said, I hated how this morning went. And I thought I knew what he was talking about, and sure enough, I did. I said, what happened? And he was talking about his cousins, another 15-year-old, 12-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And he said, I get that everybody's tired. Living outside for 2.5 days is, it's fun, but it's not easy. And he said, but the way they acted, and especially his 15-year-old cousin and his 12-year-old cousin, they look more like men than boys.
oh,
He said it was really weird to see that behavior come out of a body that looked so old.
mm,
And then his 6-year-old cousin, who's a bit of a firecracker, was doing his normal thing, but he said there was just no, he finally came around to it and said there was just no recognition that there was anybody else there, that their behavior might impact. And so I said to him, um, do you ever feel that way in instances like this? And he said, yeah, I do. And I said, our policy with you guys, or our approach with you guys, has tended to be, hey, I see how you feel. Take a break if you need. Don't feel like you got to be on our end at all. Like, go take care of yourself if you're really upset, and let us know what we can practically help with. And he said, yeah, I do feel that sometimes. And I said, so what do you think stops you from acting that way? And he said, shame. And there's a part of me, my gut sank, and I was like, oh crap. Like, I've got a shame-based child here, and he doesn't feel like he can have feelings or anything like that. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, it's just what I said earlier. Like, I think there's other people here, and it would be unacceptable for me to act a certain way.
mm,
And I said, act or feel? And he said, oh, I think I can feel whatever I want, but certain actions, certain expressions, he said, I just don't think I don't think it's the kind thing to do. I don't think it's the right thing to do. And he said, as much fun as I had with these cousins after the last 2 days, I don't want to see him again for a while. And he said, I think that plays a big role. Like, we can have fun, but the end is always so explosive. Like, it just makes me not want to be around them. So I've been rolling that over in my mind. His answer, it's shame that prevents me. And so that's what I want to talk about today. Um, uh, there are a lot of different conceptualizations of shame. If you've looked into it at all, you probably know who Brene Brown is. If you looked into it 20 years ago, you know who Pia Mellody are and Claudia Black are, because they talked about it too. Brene Brown would define what I'm going to talk about today as guilt versus shame. Um, I actually like how it was defined earlier by Claudia Black and the name that I just said,
Pia, Pia
who recently
Melody.
passed. Yeah, Pia Mellody. Um, they would call it healthy shame versus unhealthy shame. Or I would even say useful shame versus unuseful shame. So first, let's look at this. Let's look at the biology of shame, which, by the way, just like anger, just like sadness, just like grief, just like joy, there is not a somatic distinction between the useful or healthy version and the unuseful or unhealthy version. Like our sensations are just our sensations. Um, so the biology of shame, whether it can ultimately help you or not, usually starts with a rush of blood from your gut to your head, which clouds and confuses your thinking. That's why we get flushed. That's why we get red behind the ears, red in the face when we feel shame, because there is blood being diverted up into our heads and our faces. There is also a relaxing of the neck muscles back
Mm.
here. There's a dropping of the head. Now, this isn't 100% universal because the theories that Paul Ekman had about the universality of emotion are not quite law, but he was onto something in saying it's remarkably similar how emotions are expressed in the body between different people and cultures. The other thing that Ekman's work missed is um, you may see something on the surface, but without the internal narration and the context, you can't make assumptions. You can't make 100% reliable predictions about what that person is actually feeling. The um, the accuracy of the prediction has to do with how well you know the person and their context. So think about this with your kids. Um, I was saying on this camping trip, I was telling my sisters, I could just watch my 2-year-old's mouth. I could just watch his face all day long. I love to study it. He's adorable. He does the funniest things. There's little tells he has that he's feeling something, like when he starts to get extra annoying. He's already annoying because he's 2. But when he gets extra annoying, I have learned over time that that means he's ready to sleep. So again, you could look at that extra annoying and he's like, gosh, kid, like, why can't you keep it together in a social setting? You are just a little emotional terrorist. You understand the background, the context, the pattern. Oh, that means he's ready to sleep. Again, that for as much social monitoring as he has as a 2-year-old, it starts to turn off the more tired and less resourced he is. So context makes all the difference with emotions and sensations in the body, and we'll get back to that. So the biology of shame is important. It'll come in later because that's where you have to start to get resilient. That's what you have to start tolerating in order to not just be a knee-jerk reaction to shame, which those of you in early recovery and even later recovery, you're very familiar with the knee-jerk reaction. Shame, that I would say in the couples I work with, that is like the number one culprit for why people ask themselves, should I even be trying? I would say it's the personal and relational mismanagement of the experience of shame. So, resistance to shame, resistance of the sensation of shame, and even the concept of shame. As much as I love Brene Brown, I think she's done solid work based on solid research. As always happens, you can read any science headline. The headline does not always match, or often does not match, the substance of the research. So I think, unfortunately, with Brene Brown's work, the headline version is shame is bad. You shouldn't ever have to feel it. And if you are, something is wrong with the environment you are in. So I've seen a lot of people take Dr. Brown's really, really good work and they've turned it into, you are shaming me, stop it. Versus what I think her research actually points at is, no, this is a universal human experience. You have shame in you for a lot of different reasons. Can you sit with it? Can you tolerate it? And can you deal with the shame through vulnerability versus pushing it away? Ultimately, what she's done a really good job at showing a path to is a way to live outside of crippling shame. But it's not a shortcut where you tell people not to tell you what's wrong with you, or you're judgmental, or you're resisting vulnerability, or whatever. It's all internal work, and I'll outline that here in a minute. So let's just think for a minute. Why would shame evolve? It's such a problematic feeling. I think the experience of shame is at the root of a lot of relational difficulties. Why? Well, just look at the physiological expression of shame. Like I said, the flush in the head, the relaxing of the neck muscles. To me, what that looks like is a conversational or an interactional reset button. I can't think clearly and I'm looking away. That's a reset in a relationship, which I think is what shame is for. It's as a recognition that I just did something or said something that may harm the tribe, may harm the people that I depend on. So that physiological reset, stop what you're thinking, reset the gaze, like get realigned here because the way you just tried to come in could be or is hurting people. Um, we need an internal and external guardrails to make relationships function securely. Another top complaint that I'll hear as couples are looking at their future together, I'll often hear, um, I don't want to have to tell you every step of the way what you need to do to support this relationship. Now, sometimes I have to work with the individual saying that and say to them, that doesn't mean you get to zip your lip and not say anything about what you want or need. You are a co-creator in this. And I'll turn to the person who it's being said to and say, clearly your internal compass of what is useful for this relationship needs to be dusted off or developed, or you need to learn how to pay attention to it. So you see, me talking to my partner about what I want or need or where I'm disappointed or hurt is important. Also, my own sense, my own guess, what might not be working from me into this relationship. Again, which I think is that's evolutionarily, biologically speaking, that's where shame has its roots. It's the part of me that wonders, it's the part of me that guesses, it's the part of me that assumes and accepts that I may mess up. I may do things to hurt another person. Um, so one of the questions to ask yourself right now, either addict or betrayed partner, what's going on with your internal sense of shame? Is that something that has overrun you? And now everything that could or that starts in a little bit of shame has become a referendum on what kind of a soul you have. Is that something that you've experienced so much in life and you're sick of it? This was interesting. I forget where I got this information, but it was where I got the information about the relaxing the back of the neck muscles. In North American culture, we actually tense. So we go against the biological, and you can see this in our shameless culture right now. No, I didn't mess up. I didn't do anything wrong. The deny, which the tensing is in response to. There's a relaxing that wants me to break here. I'm not going to break. I'm not going to lose anything. So, have you experienced so much shame? By the way, narcissistic individuals, their attachment wounding early on is a shame wound. You can see the resistance. I experienced so much, got overwhelmed with it so much. I'm now resisting. I become impervious to it. I won't feel it. It's not a matter of I can't, it's I won't. So a good spot check question is what's going on with my internal sense of shame? Is it turned way up and is it crippling? And do I need to work on some things there? Or have I started to say, been there, done that, not ever going to feel it again? And therefore, I can't look at my own behavior through the critical lens of, I'm part of this too. I hear a lot of folks in relationships complain about shameless behavior, both betraying partners and betrayed partners. They never apologize. They don't do anything unless I tell them to. Again, what I would say is that may be less of a relational how we're navigating this problem, and that may be a personal deal you made with your own shame, and either not to feel it or not to acknowledge it. So my attestation this morning is that I don't think relationships can function without shame. And again, I'm not talking about the crippling, I'm a piece of crap kind of shame. I'm talking about the kind of shame that has a radar up in us, an appropriate radar, both acknowledges that we can either hurt or bless the people close to us, and doesn't take for granted any day of the week I'm capable of stepping on others' toes on a good day. On a bad day, I'm really capable of doing some stuff I'm not proud of. So, some appropriate sources of shame, because remember, the biological experience of shame is no different whether it's toxic or it's helpful. So, this has to do with context. In order to get to a healthy relationship with shame, a functional relationship with shame, you have to be able to think. And you're not going to be able to think if you can't tolerate what your body's going through. That's why we started with here's the physiological manifestation of shame, so that you can start to recognize this and you can start to label this. Oh, this is shame. I'm feeling that feeling in my gut, that sick feeling in my gut. I'm feeling hot in my face. I want to run away. Maybe you start to experience it because my self-talk just got super critical. So that's shame. So then the second step is to think about context, and not in the way that we like to gather truth in our life, which is there's the things that I like, and because I like them, all the evidence I find is going to be that they're good and true, like a real scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Let me look at this from a lot of different angles. What did I see from my own eyes? What did I hear with my own ears? And then, like my son pointed out with the shame, could I imagine for a minute what it's like to be other people around me right now? And could I place? So, our impact on others, I think, can be an appropriate source of shame. At the very least, we have to consider that we have one and that it matters. Whether you want to do something about your impact on others is another matter. And I would not say that the answer is always, yes, I must be willing to do something about my impact on others. Because I actually think part of the shame resilience and being able to navigate healthy shame, again, the same son, he double booked himself tonight. Tomorrow night, we're going to go to a baseball game with my family and have a barbecue. And he got tickets to a new movie with his friend, uh, knowing that this was going on. And I said to him, at this point, buddy, like you just need to realize you're going to be disappointing somebody. And he said, you made it sound like it's not a big deal. And I said, well, nobody will die and nobody will stop loving you. But because you double booked yourself, you have to say no to somebody who was anticipating spending time with you. So, our impact on others, let me think about what it might feel like for others for a minute. Oh, yep, I did that. I forgot I had an obligation here. I made another obligation here. My bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Acting against agreed upon and reasonable values and expectations within a relationship. I knew it was wrong. I knew this would hurt my spouse. That's why I kept a secret. That I think is an appropriate source of shame because look what it's resetting. Look at what you feel it in response to, not your partner's reaction, which is if you keep numbing the shame through addiction, that's when you really start to feel it. But if you stop numbing, you feel it in response to your behavior. I don't like doing this because it's not who I am. Um, Secrets that do, in fact, hurt other people. When I stop justifying to myself, well, it doesn't hurt anybody else, and I really look at the impact. Well, my partner and I agreed, or we thought that it was just the two of us, and I've invited all these third entities into my mind, into my fantasy, into my life. Another source of appropriate shame, acting out of self-preservation and not owning it. So I would say here, again, in the scheme of things, there's nothing wrong with acting out of self-preservation. It's when you try to dress it up. It's when you try to hide your motive. So when we're under a lot of stress, we are going to focus more and more on ourselves only, and we'll have more and more of a screw you attitude to everybody else and their feelings and our impact. Um, I actually think it can be empowering to own, yep, I'm under a lot of stress. Things are not working for me. I'm going to take a break. I know this leaves you in a tough spot. I know me saying no to you right now. I know me not wanting to do this. It's not good for you, but it's what I can handle right now. And if you will, I'd like to clean up with you later. But I think that can be so empowering to just own, yep, I'm looking out for number one. It's when we don't, we try to hide it, we try to obfuscate it, we try to manipulate. No, this is actually good for you, when in fact it's really based on what I want. That is an appropriate source of shame because it distorts reality. It makes other people question what they are feeling and what they're experiencing. So when you set a boundary with your partner and your partner says, "Gosh, that doesn't feel good at all," and you say, well, because that one's for me, not for us. It's for me. And then maybe you get a chance to talk about it. Is that really the best thing to do right now? Do we need to, again, ride out this bump and fix things later? It's when you don't own it, when you can't say, yep, I'm being selfish, I'm acting against the interest of the herd, or temporarily, I got to get what I need first. I need to sleep before we talk about this, whatever that is. And then living a reasonable, and another source of appropriate shame is not living under reasonable benchmarks of maturity and functionality. So I can go back to what my son said. Crazy when he said it's weird to see that kind of behavior come out of a body that looks that old. Very rarely do I work with what I would say are extremely immature people who don't have a strong shame core. And I think that's part of it. I think that's part of the shame. There's got to be this part of us that says, as an adult, I think I ought to be able to do better. As a parent, I think I ought to be able to do better. And it's not that maturity just happens because we chronologically age. Like, we have to work at it. We have to be taught by it, about it. We have to be challenged into it. So I think functioning under, and I see this, out of the emotional range, folks who maybe under earn or underperform in their profession or at work. I think I could do better, but I'm so scared to take the risk. Like me saying to my son, you just need to face disappointing. So you need to choose who you're going to disappoint, and you need to face it. Again, there's a maturity thing. Okay, I can handle some disappointment. I can understand that friendships and relationships aren't always smooth. I can understand there's hard choices in life. That's a grown-up thing to do. And I did say to him, I said, I put myself in about 6 of these situations a week. So welcome to adulthood. Like, so a lack of maturity, whether we know it and can pinpoint it, but if we're living in it, I think you're going to shame, and that shame can actually be a good point to start digging down on, and you can start making improvements. So let's talk about a few pointers for starting to align with appropriate shame. How can you use it to help you? And this isn't alchemy. This isn't turning garbage into gold. This is utilizing gold to pay the fare to make your life better. So this all hinges on my theory, that is that there are healthy, useful applications of shame. So the first one I would say is develop resilience, develop acceptance, and the ability to tolerate the sensation. That's the first one. So those memories that come up when you're like this close to sleep that wake you up because you think of all the awful things you did, instead of trying to change your mind or tell yourself, that didn't happen, or, those people were awful or whatever, just take a breath, put your hand where you're feeling something. You're going to survive. If it's your feeling, you can tolerate it. If it's somebody else's feeling, you need to process it out of you. So recognize the sensations of shame. The sensations alone aren't going to tell you whether it's useful or not. So when we can tolerate that moment where our frontal lobe goes offline because we're overwhelmed, it will come back online, and then we can think. So learn how to speak it out loud. I'm feeling shame right now. Gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I feel terrible. The next pointer I would say is stop telling yourself stories about how other people caused this or that. As you examine your behavior and feelings in reaction to your circumstances. So certainly people do things to us. Certainly things happen. We can become victims of things, certainly. And this is not me saying what people do after that doesn't matter. I'm saying if you want to get resilient and use your shame, after the bomb drops, pretend that nobody else exists in the world. For those of you who play video games, the term is NPC, non-player character. Pretend that everybody else is an NPC. They're just programmed. They can't actually interact with the story. It's just you. What that does is it stops the stories that we make up, and Brene Brown talks a lot about this. It stops the stories that we make up about other people that actually prevents us from feeling and dealing with our shame. So it comes back to me. That can help you look at, what have I been saying? What have I been doing? Even, what am I not good at? What do I need practice on? Because again, lack of maturity or incompetency or lack of ability to rise to the occasion of what your life requires, those are all sources of shame. This same son, when he was in kindergarten, did not want to put any effort into learning how to read. It was frustrating. He would even say to us, "You guys read to me all the time. Why do I need to know how to do this?" Or he knew how to do like speech to text on the computer or the phone. He's like, it can read it to me. He went to first grade the first day. It was a new school. We had moved. It was a new school, and he came back this close to tears, and he says, "Everybody in my class can read really well, but me. What do you want to do about that?" And he said, "I'm working at it." Within 3 weeks, he was up to benchmark. He could read, but he worked his butt off, and it started with shame. I'm not like everybody else here. I'm behind. I don't want to be that. And he's looking at his place in the herd. He's looking at what the herd's doing and saying, "I'd like to do what they do." There's shame involved in that, but the kid didn't get lost in, "I'm awful, and I got to get to work." Um, Develop practices that combat toxic shame. You're not bad. You're not crap. You might need affirmations. You might need loving people in your life who can remind you you're not a bad person. You aren't a problem. You do bad things. You do problematic things, but you are not bad. The best sponsors that my clients have begin and end every call with, "I want to remind you that I love you. I want to remind you that nothing that we've talked about, nothing that you could do could change that fact. I'm here for you." Good sponsors do that not because they're trying to let their sponsee off the hook and fluff it, but because they know how important it is. They know how deep the shame goes in addiction, and they're helping them delineate, you are good. What you do is not always. So with those bookends, we can get to work on that. So those are some thoughts on the role of shame in healthy relationships. I hope if you're stuck in that right now, even early in recovery, if this is day one and you found this webinar, I hope you can take at least one of those pointers, one of those ideas, and start to cultivate it, start to shift the narrative around shame, because it's not the enemy. In fact, it can really help. It can really help glue a relationship together, and get you acting right and eventually feeling right towards your partner and the commitment you've made.
So I have to honor you as a parent, you and your wife, because it's the teamwork, like I just like the things that you say, um, when you're talking about your kids, like I go, gosh, they're going to grow up to be healthy adult human beings. And I just want to honor that. No, no, but even the 2-year-old you're talking about, like, he gets over the top crazy and needs a nap. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of adults, like, I mean, like we all, if we were all paying attention to our, oh, I'm doing this, I need a nap, I need a food, I need a whatever, we would be better off. And you talked about, I accept that I may mess up. Like I own, I will mess up. I'm a human being. I'm absolutely going to mess up. Like I know that for sure. It's just a matter of when and how, and I have a 12-step program that will help me make amends. Um, you were talking about, like the acting out of self-preservation, and not owning it. But if you own it, and my thinking was, first thought was, oh, an addict to go, well, I'm just doing self-preservation. So it feels like you have to be able to have the context of, and I'm going to talk to you about this. Can you help
Yeah,
with that?
yeah. Self-preservation is not a get out of jail free card. And remember, if you're in a relationship, if my motivation is self-preservation, that does not look good in or work well for a relationship. So it's not this, "Hey, I got to take care of myself first." It's owning, and the consequences that come along with that. If I say to my partner, "Hey, I'm going to play the selfish card here, and I know we've got objectives that we need to complete, but I really need a walk, or I really need to call with my sponsor, or I need a bike ride, or whatever. And I'm willing to face the consequences of my choice. I get I'm not acting in a relationship positive way. I'm not asking for your absolution. I am telling you, I know where I'm focused. See, empowerment is not playing God. Empowerment is actually being a real human being. Our choices have consequences, and I can own my choice and I can face the consequence. That's what I'm saying with that.
Thank you. And I get that and honor that. And I also go, oh yeah, and next, well, Jon Taylor said that I just need to take ownership that I need to do self-preservation. So and then one more thing before we get to the questions, because I talk often well, two more things. Resilience. I love that you talk about resilience, and I think a lot of people go, well, I don't have resilience, and it's like a muscle. You can build it, and it takes practice. So I think everybody can learn to be resilient. I used to think it was a character trait, and I've learned since that it's not. No, we can learn that. The more we practice, the more the more that we survive whatever, and we go, oh, I actually survived that. Okay, yeah, that's great, good. And then the telling stories, going to the automatic. Well, they were just doing that to be, whatever. Matt Wheeler talks about making gracious assumptions, and I actually that phrase comes to mind often now with like maybe I should, if I just pull back a little bit and think about this, do I really think that they were doing it just to be malicious and hurtful to me? They probably have other things on their mind. They probably weren't even thinking about me, and therefore it changes the focus. But my big question is, guilt and shame. Like, do you have, like, how do you differentiate guilt from healthy shame?
Yeah, there's with that, there's nothing new under the sun in this field. We all just repackage and repurpose what's already been done. So if you need a separate word in your mind, where I'm coming from is if you need a separate word in your mind because the experiences are so similar, like God bless you, call it guilt.
Okay.
I'm looking from a neurological standpoint. It's all shame. Our body all experiences as shame. However, the context and the conclusions I make are different. So in guilt, the context is behavior focused. What did I do? What did I say? What was its impact? Guilt is a feeling I get, then when what I did or what I said hurt another person. Um, there can be some guilt, like when I said to my son, you're going to be disappointing somebody. You need to pick it and face it. There is some guilt that we can't undo. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to turn you down on this, or can we do this another night? Just because you feel the guilt doesn't mean you can fix it. He and I were having a discussion last night, and he said, you don't put stuff on the family calendar. And I said, for the record, you don't either. Because we talked about this event, and where does it become? Where did we decide it was just my responsibility to put family stuff on the calendar? I think there's four of us that can operate that. So when we talk about an event, like you could check, you could put it in. Guilt doesn't always get to go away. It may be a natural consequence of what we've done, and it may be more of a, hey, next time I want to feel less of that, so I'm going to do something a little bit different. Shame or toxic shame is focused on who I am. Doesn't matter past, present, or future. So a lot of folks who have that deep, like toxic shame pit, they may have overtly gotten those messages as a child. You are a bad child. You are the wrong kind of kid for me. Why do you make things so hard for me? There wasn't a parent who protected from that. And kids make conclusions. Like our 4 year old, maybe about a year and a half ago, she started saying to us, I'm just a naughty kid. I'm just a bad kid. We don't say that to her. We didn't give her that. But we protected her from that. We said, no, you're not. You're 3. You get into stuff. You make messes. You don't know how to control your emotions. Like those are all normal things for a 3 year old. There is nothing wrong with you. So shame is the sense of wrongness taking root in our soul versus guilt, where it's my wrongness is about what I do, not about who I am. So when you have that strong alliance with I'm bad, and when I do better, I get happy mom or happy dad or happy partner. That's a destructive shame cycle because personality traits and who we are doesn't change over time. So if you have the wrong idea about it, I'm the wrong kind of person versus I'm a particular kind of person. And there are some things about me that play really well with others, and there's other things that don't play really well with others, just like everybody else. Um, does that distinction help?
Yeah, that helps a lot because yeah, I didn't. It does a lot, and we've got questions. So, first question: betrayed partner. I am so frustrated, even when I clearly spell out to my husband what I need him to do to correct abuse from the past. I have to remind him and then set a deadline, and then he does not deliver until the last minute. I don't want to live having to beg and be policed to get my needs met.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Um, you know, sometimes the reality that we're facing, this relationship may not work. My partner may not have a big enough fire under them. Um, Sometimes that induces us to do hand holding where we need to actually make a steeper incline. And I'm not talking about getting like vindictive or anything like that. Um, I would encourage this. What I'm saying here. I ask for something, then I have to remind, then I set a deadline. I would start with the deadline. I need you to work on this in individual therapy. Um, I need to see improvement. I need to see a shift in this dynamic in 3 months, 6 months, or you and I will be having a different conversation. Now, why I would say start stronger, start more. What you see as the extreme is first of all, um, when we need to break through our partner's nervous system. How do I want to say this? The intensity of the message has to be able to get to the static in our partner. And for a lot of addicts who have lived in this self-absorbed, I can delay consequences way, the language of consequence and the language of urgency gets through the static. There's a difference between ultimatums and threats and really clearly spelled out parameters. So if you don't like the hand holding, if you don't like the I'm having to remind and then beg and then on and on, just start with the you have so much time. This goes back to what Stan Tatkin talks about learning how to manage our partners correctly. I'm not diagnosing anybody here, but say for example, if you have an ADHD partner or someone whose brain works that way, they work better under stress. They focus better under stress. So not that you would be mean or coercive, but utilizing that knowledge when I can get the request across with the appropriate urgency, that might actually land for my partner better. And if it doesn't, what I'm looking at is I was clear as could be. This is not an issue of me not communicating or me not taking this seriously. This is something that you're not doing. So directness provides clarity. Indirectness, too much, I would say, coddling can actually drag out hurtful dynamics longer than they need to be.
Yeah, and I was thinking this feels like a pattern, because that you do this and he waits and waits and waits until the very end. So yeah, different approach. Okay, betrayed partner here with too many years of betrayal, abuse, and too many D days. I have incredible shame for staying, and now I am afraid that even if my husband gets into recovery, I will not be able to get rid of some of this shame.
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate that dynamic, and I appreciate that feeling. And I think your view, in some ways, or in this respect, is right where it needs to be. You're going to have some things on your side of the equation that you're going to have to work out that are independent of whether or not your partner gets better. And in situations like this, even if you ultimately decide to leave, I think everybody has to reckon with, I chose to stay at least for some period of time. And especially after you start knowing what you know, and this is not a dig on anybody. It's not like the right answer is leave universally. It's not. One thing that can, again, we deflate shame by connecting to actions, not who we are. Even after knowing what I knew and experiencing what I experienced, I made a choice to stay. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for that, and they could be valid reasons. So starting to look at and feel through the lens of, regardless of whether it was right or wrong, it was a choice I made. How was I thinking at the time? How was I feeling at the time? I can also put on the table, I have choice in the future too. I think I told this story here. There was a couple I worked with a long time ago. They moved out of state, and I recently got to reconnect with them at a 12-step conference. And they made the comment that every day we redecide whether or not we're going to stay
Mm.
together. And their relationship has been in good repair for a long time. So it's not like, we wake up hating each other and saying, are we going to do this again? No, it's they remind themselves every day. Past is what it is. We've done what we've done. And the most important thing that either keeps us here or somewhere else or on the track for health, it's the choices we make. I hope that helps. There's no wrong answer here, but it can help to own there's choices I'm making and there's reasons why I make those choices. Try leveling with that and see what that does.
I love the intentionality of like I'm choosing today, and you're right. There were reasons, if it had been right for you in the moment to leave back then, you probably would have. And second guessing, it's always easy, to look in the rearview mirror and go, oh, hey, I should have. Well, we didn't. Here's where we are now. How can you feel connected with your partner when capacity for emotional fulfillment is different? I feel my needs are much greater than my partner's. For example, he may feel fulfilled just by simply being in the same room and not speaking. I would need more. My partner is ADHD, ASD level 1 and ADHD, and wonder how much this factors into our differences. And please come to Candace Christensen's webinar next month. I'm going to go find that one right now while you answer. So,
Candace is like one of the gurus on this. She'd be great to learn from you.
yes.
From a nervous system level, which is where our preferences for attachment come from. Of course, things like ADHD and autism affect that. Our attachment history affects that. Our temperament affects that. Our personality, our experiences, all of it. So you can't feel automatically and without effort, you can't feel connected to another person who does not easily interface with you. And I would say probably in 80% of the couples who come through my office, there's not a real natural, easy interface. That's also not doom and gloom. Especially if you're someone who experiences yourself, or you feel like you've gotten that feedback from relationships that you're too needy or that you're higher need, you actually have to lean into that. You have to own it. I know you would be completely satisfied to just be in the same room and hear me breathing. I need touch. I need conversation. I need eye contact. You also have to reckon with that's not automatically going to change your partner. Your partner may never get there intuitively, but they may be able to get there through, I thought this through. I know my partner needs this, so I have to work on it. I have to remind myself to do this because it doesn't come naturally. And so it's not a deal breaker that our path to emotional fulfillment is different as long as both of us are interested in learning enough about our partner to be good stewards of that partner. So for example, we have a pet tortoise, red-footed tortoise. They're a tropical species. Our first setup of his pen, and he would get sick. We weren't differentiating in species, so we set it up for a desert tortoise. There wasn't enough humidity in there. There wasn't enough airflow, and the heat fluctuated too much. Turns out the differences between the species are important. So as we got educated, as we got him properly specied and started working with a reptile specialist vet, our little Rosie boy is much more happy and much more healthy because we've learned about him specifically. And it doesn't come naturally to me to turn on. We don't have a humidifier in our house, but we do for his tortoise table because he needs it, and we want him to be happy and healthy. It's the same thing in our relationships. You have to learn about the species that you are with, and you have to be committed to care for them. You have to be committed to contribute to that, or be honest about your lack of desire to do that so they can make a real choice.
Yeah, I think about the love languages, and I use this with friends too. So it isn't just with your primary, but I have people that, really appreciate gifts. That is not as much a me thing. Like I would rather have you like, doing a task. Like I always say, I love a man with dishpan hands, like doing something like that is really meaningful to me. My husband vacuums. Yay. It's like one of those things where just understanding what resonates with people. Like with emails, I had, colleagues that like I'm just like, give me the 5 words that I need to know, but I have people that need 3 paragraphs. And so I've learned that if I want to get into connection with those people, I have to do 3 paragraphs, including the 5 words I need. And it's just, but it helps me navigate relationships better. So I think it's all really important to understand, like you said, what species we are. CSATs usually say when you are guilty of what you did, but shame is destructive. I happen to agree with you. I think they must move through the shame and learn to deal with the uncomfortable feelings. My spouse is post disclosures and polygraph. Both brought out new information. My spouse is now deep in shame and trying desperately to throw it off and is hurting me. What do you advise with a spouse that is experiencing this type of blame shifting, Darvo, and ultimately emotional abuse?
So a couple of things. If you've done disclosure and polygraph, I'm assuming they have a therapist. I really have my fingers crossed that they do. Again, I can't say this enough. I would advise everybody here, do not do disclosure unsupported by a therapist who knows. This is why. First of all, this is information that the therapist needs to know is on the table so that they can work with it and your partner can become accountable. The other thing I would look at here, I mean, you said emotional abuse. Emotional is not a qualifier for abuse. Abuse is abuse. And ultimately, in relationships where abuse is happening, there's a troublesome dynamic. As you get more empowered and more boundaried, you're likely to get a bigger target on your back. So if there's anything that's going to catch attention and change the dynamic here, is your partner being confronted with the reality that they can't just treat you in the relationship however they want and expect it to stay around. That may make things worse. It may up the heat. It also might be a wake up call. It's hard to predict. So for you that's writing this, I would really encourage you to look at and get serious about the boundaries you need for your own safety and emotional protection. If there is a therapist for your partner, make sure that information is being shared with that therapist about what you're experiencing at home. And ultimately, you have to be concerned with your own safety first. And I like how a colleague put it with one of the couples that I work with. I sent one of these individuals to work with this guy, and they had a really verbally abusive dynamic going on. And his individual therapist said to him, "Hey, listen, man, you have to set a boundary. And if you set a good boundary, the relationship will take care of itself." And the guy said, "Well, I'm worried that this boundary we're talking about will end it." And he said, "Like I said, a good boundary, the relationship will take care of itself." It just so happens the boundary that he set was the wake up call both of them needed. It changed the dynamic. It brought them both back to couple session. And both he and his spouse were willing to say, that was no way to treat you. I want to figure out why I'm doing that and I want to stop.
And probably really scary to set that boundary. Okay, confused because I thought guilt says I did something bad and shame says I'm bad. So I'm having trouble understanding why shame is actually good. In fact, when I was having an affair and struggling to stop the behavior, what helped me stop was reading about guilt and shame, that guilt is a warning light to stop the behavior and that shame can drive the behavior. I was able to stop the behavior once I understood the shame was keeping me there, creating a vicious loop.
Awesome. Awesome. Like I said before, this is semantics. I use shame as the term for both something I differentiate between healthy shame and toxic shame, or useful shame and unuseful shame, because I'm coming from a somatic neurobiological orientation, which says there's not a different sensation for guilt. From a cognitive orientation, yeah, guilt and shame are totally different mechanisms. So it doesn't matter. Whatever helps you keep it straight. And it sounds like, yeah, you being able to differentiate between shame and guilt and to see that guilt is going to help me get out of this, shame is going to drive it more. Perfect. You got the message.
Okay, the next one. How can we tell if the betrayer feels shame for their actions or for being discovered and having to deal with the fallout?
Well, it's all shame. And I actually think that there's kind of a dimmer switch, I would say, or a deepening recognition in coming to the reality of our actions. So the oh crap, I got caught. Um, if the person is willing to tolerate those emotions and stay with it, it will deepen into, yeah, getting caught wasn't the problem. Doing this, being out of alignment with my values, hurting those that I love was the problem. So as with a lot of things in recovery, it's time will tell. And another plug for good therapy, a good disclosure process, a good timeline process. Generally, if I get someone who's really committed to fixing a problem, any of their surface or ultimately long-term not helpful stuff, it will yield to deeper stuff if they've got a good recovery process. They're working steps, working with a sponsor, working with a qualified therapist.
My addict partner is drowning in shame anytime there is anything between us that doesn't go smoothly or I am unhappy with him. He then spirals into a victim mentality. If nothing is any better and stops communicating, starts blaming and deflecting. When this happens, he will relapse, binge drink, and utilize one of his other addictions. How can he get more self awareness to stop his own cycle? As it stands now, someone else usually sees it and brings it to his attention.
And that last line, isn't that the way it goes? I think about the people in my life who held up a mirror. And I mean, again and again, not just one instance, but again and again, were some really important wake up calls. So in this instance, I would examine what you feel when things don't go smoothly, and a piece you can offer if you want. I mean, ultimately, your partner's responsible for themselves and will do what they're going to do. But if things not going smoothly is not a deal breaker for you, hey, I'm expecting we're going to have problems. I'm expecting it's going to get hard. Guess what? It just got hard. I'm not looking for the door. I hope you're not either. You can offer some of that scaffolding, you can offer some of that encouragement, or even the direct wake up call if you think it would go well. Hey, your shame's not doing anything, your self pity's not doing anything for you. What I would rather see is that you get to work on figuring out how to correct some of the stuff that doesn't make you or me feel good. And I'm here for it. You get on that track, you'll have no bigger supporter than me. Keep doing this and we're going to have problems. But start, you might, if you have it in you, if that feels genuine, you might offer, I don't see this as a deal breaker. I'm willing to struggle with you. I'm willing for this to be hard.
So the last question is, can someone weaponize shame? I am the betrayed and my partner constantly shuts down whenever I used to share something that made him feel shame. It feels abusive to blame me for sharing my true and calm feelings and shut down, triggering me to feel abandoned and worthless. It's become a vicious cycle. So in order to have any connection, I have to remain silent. We have separated and I am healing, just trying to understand.
When I see this dynamic with a couple live in front of me, there's a couple different places I'll go. First is getting curious with the person who just heard the thing that made them feel shame. What just shifted in your body? Why did it shift? Again, bringing up some of that awareness and even checking with the person who is expressing. And I'll have them lock eyes. Can you look at your partner right now who just told you this thing that made you feel bad? Do they have any malice in their eyes? Are they saying this to make you feel bad? Saying it for a different reason. So there can be a reorientation. A lot of times you have to do deeper, more regressive work. And so a follow-up question I'll ask for the person who's just overcome with shame is whose face did you just see on your partner's?
Mm.
Who in the past has made you feel this way? Because often that kind of regression, that kind of deep, like you're either mom or dad for this person, like almost 100% guarantee. And so this is what I said in part of my tip, like pretend there's nobody else in the world. It's just you. So yes, my partner just said this thing that made me feel bad, but now my partner's a non-player character. They don't interact here. I'm just looking at me. What's going on with me? It reminds me of how my mom used to talk. Okay, and how does that make you feel? How big did you feel? How big do you feel now? What are you going to do about it? Or, it's just me. Well, yeah, I hate hearing again and again that I'm not sensitive to my partner. I think I am, but clearly They're saying again and again, I don't feel your heart there, and I don't know how to get it there. Okay, task. We can learn how to do that. You can learn how to unblend, de-armor. You can actually learn how to be vulnerable. So um, it's an internal work here. It's not a relationship dynamic. And the advice I'll give to the partner who says, I don't want to trigger this anymore, it's such hell. I say to them, I get it. You have to do what you have to do to protect yourself. But also think about this. If your partner's never challenged with reality, how are they going to rise to meet it? As a couple, we have to decide, are we interested in feeling better? Or are we interested in doing better? And there's a joint reorganization. I have a lot of couples I work with where this is the issue. Hey, we have a shame problem here. We're both locked in on it. We're both serious about it. We're going to do something.
Perfect to end on. Thank you for all the great questions. Great topic. We'll see you next time. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.